So, as we have discussed what perfect competition is, it is the market structure in which there are very large number of buyers and sellers and they are selling a homogeneous product. Homogeneous product means the product which all the sellers are selling, it is that much similar that no buyer can identify that who is the seller of my product. Means buyers are not able to distinguish one seller's product from another seller's product. That is why we are saying there is a homogeneous product. It means all the products, means the products of all the sellers, they are close substitute or the perfect substitutes of each other, that they resemble in each sense, in every sense there is no differentiation. That is why we are saying it is a homogeneous product. So, features we talk, as we said, there are large number of buyers and sellers. The product is homogeneous, means it is not differentiated. All the products, means the products of all the sellers, they are perfect substitutes of each other. It means that there is cross elasticity of demand of the product of one seller with respect to another seller would be equals to 1, because they are perfect substitutes of each other. There is freedom of entry and exit. It means new players can easily enter the industry and existing players can easily leave the industry. There are no cost and legal restrictions associated with that. There is perfect knowledge in the market. It means buyers and sellers, they know each and everything related to the market, related to the product, related to the sources of supply and the factors of production. There is perfect elastic demand curve. Here the elasticity or the price elasticity of demand is equals to infinity. That means the demand is perfectly elastic. It means even if there are minute changes in prices, the demand would be affected by a huge amount. That is why we are saying that the demand is perfectly elastic. And let us recall, if the demand is perfectly elastic, how the demand curve would be? It would be a straight line which is parallel to the x axis. This we have to remember when we will be talking about the price and output determination. There is the seller is the price taker. It means that who decides the price? The seller? No. The buyer? No. The interaction of both demand and supply in the market would determine the price. The market demand and the market supply will lead us to a market price. Perfect mobility of factors of production means that the factors of production are perfectly mobile. It means any seller can buy any quantity of the factors of production and they can be available to all the sellers in the same sense at the same point of time at the same price. There is no government intervention, means there are no legal restrictions, because we have already said that there are no barriers to entry and exit. Then the types of profit. So, moving ahead, we need to know how much or how many types of profits are there. In economics, there are particular terms associated with calculation of profits. So, there are basically 3 types of profit: supernormal profit, normal profit and supernormal losses. So, to know what is the difference between these things, supernormal profit is also called as economic profit. In economics, we say it is economic profit. And when the economic profit is? Economic profit is when average revenue is greater than the average cost. It means revenue per unit of output and cost per unit of output. If we compare these two things, the average revenue is higher than the average cost. That is why there is profit. So, in real sense there are profits. That is why this is called as supernormal profit or economic profit. The normal profit means, normal profit actually it is the break even point. It is also called as the break even point, where average revenue and average cost both are equal. So, if we have a situation where average revenue is equals to average cost, we will assume that there is actually no profit and there is no cost. So, it means there is no profit, no loss, it is a break even point, and we will say in economics it is normal profit. Supernormal loss is called as economic, it is called as economic loss. So, to know what is economic loss? The condition where average revenue is less than the average cost. So, it is clearly visible that the per unit revenue is less than the per unit cost, that is why there is a loss. In actual sense there is a loss because there is revenues are lesser than the cost, it is called as economic loss. Then every seller has a question, every seller in any kind of competition has a question that how to determine my level of output and the price, means he wants to have the maximum profit. If there are situations of profits, he wants to identify, he wants to know when would be the maximum profits available to me, and he is also interested to know if he is into losses, then he wants to minimize his loss. So, there are, what is the objective of a seller? To maximize the profit and to minimize the loss. So, to identify that optimum situation where the maximum profit is and the minimum loss is, there is a condition in economics which we say condition of optimum output. So, for finding out the optimum output and the price for any seller in any of the market structures, we need to remember this. These points we have to remember, because whenever we are talking about, whenever we will discuss in our coming slides regarding the price and output determination, we should remember what was the condition, because at that point of time we would be referring to these situations. So, what is the situation? The condition of optimum output is that the marginal cost should equals to the marginal revenue. So, we will get the optimum output at a point where these two things are equal. We have already discussed in the previous lecture what is the marginal cost and what is the marginal revenue. Then the second condition is that the marginal cost should intersect the marginal revenue from below. What does it mean? If I want to show it graphically, so how does it look? It will be like this. If this is the marginal revenue line and this is the marginal cost curve. So, the point where marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue, there are 2 points A and B. So, situation number 1, the point number 1 is at point A and at point B, but the second condition says that the marginal cost should intersect the marginal revenue from below. Here it is intersecting from above, here is intersecting from below. So, what is the point where both the situations are being fulfilled? It is at point number B, where marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue and marginal cost is intersecting marginal revenue from below. So, this we have to remember in for like whenever we will be doing the price and output determination. So, coming ahead, we have to find out, like seller has a dilemma that how much should be the price and how much should be the output. And I have already said that it is a feature of perfect competition that seller cannot determine the price. Then who determines the price? Demand and supply. It is simple that the price, for price he need not to bother, because price is determined by the market forces. What are the market forces? Demand and supply forces. So, for that he know that it is the price, but he wants to know that what should the output, what should be the output which I should sell in this market to have again to maximum profit or to minimum losses, because he want to excel. It is the objective of every business to maximize the profits and minimize the losses. So, in the perfect competition there are 3 situations which we say very short run and long run. So, starting from the very short run is the time period. It is the time period when the supply of every seller is constant. It means the market supply remains constant. It is that small duration of time when no seller can change the supply. For example, what is the supply of vegetables in today's at today's time in a mandi? That would be constant for a day. For a day it would remain constant. For another day it may change, it may increase or it may decrease. So, that is why we are saying very short run. Very short run means the total supply, the market supply is constant. So, under the very short run, how the price is determined? Again I have said that the price is determined by the demand and supply, and I have said that the supply is constant. So, here there is no question of finding out the optimum output. Why? Because whatever the quantity he is having for today, he has to sell it, he cannot change it, he cannot maximize it, he cannot minimize it. So, what he can do? He can identify what is the price for today. So, as I have said, demand is having a negative slope falling downwards. Suppose this is the market demand and this is the market this is the market supply. As I have said, this is market supply is constant. So, for today market supply is denoted by this line MS. So, how the market price would be determined? By the point where market demand is equals to market supply. If there is price on this axis and there is quantity on this axis, so how the price would be determined? The interaction of demand and supply. So, what would be the price for today? The price would be the price at which all the sellers have to sell is equals to OP, and what is the quantity which they can sell is OQ. So, E is the point where demand is equals to supply, and this point has given us the market price. So, this is how the price is determined in the short run. So, in the very short run. So, we can say in the very short run the prices are dependent on the demand and supply, where supply would be constant. Like if suppose demand increases for that day, so the demand curve would shift upwards. If the demand increases, so price will increase. So, price will increase. Let us assume that the demand falls for today. So, it was the earlier demand, it was the supply, this was demand D1, this was the supply, market supply, and suppose demand falls down. So, now the market demand becomes MD2. So, earlier the price was OP1 and now the price becomes OP2. So, what we have concluded here from this interaction of demand and supply, that if the supply increases, the market price will decrease, but as I have said supply is constant. So, it depends on the demand. So, as the demand increases, market price will increase, as the demand decreases, market price will decrease. So, this is how the prices are dependent on the market demand and supply in the very short run. So, what we have concluded, that if the demand increases, price will increase, if the demand decreases, market price will decrease, and this is the price which every seller has to take for selling in a particular day, on a particular day. So, this was the very short run. So, now moving ahead, we have, so we want to see what we have discussed here. We have discussed this, that how the firm is taking the price by the market demand and supply, by the interaction of market demand and supply, and the price was determined. Now, moving ahead to the short run. Earlier we have talked about the very short run, here is the short run. The short run is the situation where sellers can adjust their output, they can change the supply, but the scale of operations can't be changed. It means they cannot start new plant, they cannot diversify their business, they can't do mergers and joint ventures. So, the scale of operations can't be increased, but yes, supply can be changed only up to some extent depending on their factors of, or the variable factors of production. So, if they can change the variable factors of production, so up to that limit they can change the supply, the market supply or their supply. So, under the very short run, how the prices are determined? So, they depends on the cost structure and the revenues of the seller. The market price and the average cost and the average revenue and the marginal cost, they will determine whether the seller is having supernormal profit, normal profit or supernormal losses. So, here comes the type of profit into the question, that if this kind of situation is, what type of profits would be there for the seller. So, there can be, first situation, there can be supernormal profit. So, to discuss supernormal profit, how the prices are determined, this is the industry and prices are determined by the market demand and the market supply. If this is the demand, market demand, this is the market supply. So, how much price is determined? Suppose it is equals to OP. Here is the price on the y axis and the quantity on the x axis. So, now what sellers would be doing? How the sellers will be finding out their optimum output, this we are discussing here. So, now the sellers, they have to take the same price, it means they have to sell whatever the output they have to sell at the same price. If it is their revenue and the cost, and if it is their quantity, here is the quantity which they have to sell. So, this is the price, they have to sell at the price equals to OP. Now, let us recall what we have said, that the price is equals to, in the perfect competition, the demand curve is a straight line which is parallel to the x axis. So, it is equals to demand, this is the demand of the seller, and demand is equals to average revenue, this we have discussed in the previous lecture, and it is also equals to marginal revenue of the seller. Suppose it is the average cost of the seller and this is the marginal cost of the seller. So, how the optimum output he would be determining? He would be determining the optimum output by the rule of optimum output. What was the rule of optimum output? Where the point, find out a point where MR is equals to MC. So, here this is marginal cost and this line is the marginal revenue line. So, how the optimum output would be determined? The point where MR and marginal revenue are equal. So, where they are equal? At this point E, at this point E. So, drawing a ordinate from x axis will give him the optimum output. So, what is the optimum output which seller should sell? It is equals to OQ. Now, to identify, is the seller having profits or he is having losses? So, how we will determine this? By comparing his average revenue and average cost. So, now how much is the average cost? This is the average cost, denoting it a point by point M. So, EM, what is the average cost? Average cost is the MQ, average cost for the seller, for selling quantity OQ is the MQ, and what is the average revenue? Average revenue is the EQ. So, which one is greater out of them? EQ and MQ. So, EQ is greater than MQ, it means average revenue is greater than average cost. So, what kind of profits are there? There are economic profits. There are economic profits for the seller, which is a good condition. So, how we have determined? This is the profit per unit. This is the profit per unit because it is the difference between AR and AC. So, what would be the total profit? Total profit would be this area. It would be the supernormal profit for the seller, and it is clearly visible that in this situation seller can adjust his output to OQ. If he is selling output OQ, he would be having this much profit, and this would be a good situation for the seller. But now the question is, does the every seller is having this profits? No, they do not have the same profits because it depends on their average cost and their marginal cost. what is their average cost and the marginal cost, it depends on that. So, that is why there can be normal profits as well. When there will be normal profits, again we can see by with the help of the diagram. So, if this is the industry and this is the firm, again doing the same thing, if this is the demand, this is the supply, that is the market price OP, and how much price seller has to take, he has to take the same price OP, and if his average cost is equals to this, marginal cost is equals to this. So, where will be the optimum output? This is the average revenue and this is the marginal revenue. So, optimum output is determined at a point E. Drawing the ordinate, the optimum output for the seller will be equals to OQ. Now, we compare what is the average revenue and average cost. This is the average revenue and this is the average cost, both are equal, it means there are only normal profits. So, depending on the cost structure of the seller. Again, depending on the cost structure, there can be losses, supernormal losses. How the supernormal losses are determined? Supernormal losses are determined, again doing the same thing, but here we will be taking the different cost for the seller. Again, it is the industry and it is the firm. Again, we are taking the same thing, it is the firm. Here is the demand, the supply, here is the market price determined for the seller, and seller is again selling at price OP. So, what will be the optimum output? Depends on his average cost. Now, suppose his average cost is higher, it is his marginal cost. So, where will be the average, the optimum output determined? The point where MR and MC are intersecting, this point will give us the optimum output, this ordinate from E. So, what will be the here? This is the, so what is the here again comparing what is the average revenue and average cost. So, here if we denote it by M, so average revenue is equals to MQ and average cost is equals to EQ. It means that average cost is higher, it means this is the loss, and how much is the loss? This much is the loss for the seller. So, we will say there are supernormal losses for the seller. So, this we have discussed how the price and output are determined in short run. So, there can be three situations: profit, normal profit and supernormal losses. Then in under the long run, what happens in the long run? See, we have already seen there can be profits, there can be losses, there can be economic profits in the short run. So, what happens is when all the sellers, generally all the sellers, if they are having supernormal profits, so what will happen? That new firms would be attractive. Now, what is long run? Long run is the situation where new firms can enter the industry and existing firms can leave the industry. So, on like if they see that there is huge profit in this industry, so new entrants would be attracted to the industry and they will enter it. So, what will happen? The supply will increase. When the supply will increase, there will be impact on the market price, the market price will decrease, and if the market price will decrease, the revenues of the sellers will decrease. Earlier they were having supernormal profits, in that situation they will having losses, because their revenues will decrease so much that they would have losses. When they are having losses, so all the firms would not able to survive the losses, some of the firms may leave the industry, and when they leave the industry, the supply will again shrink, it will again decrease. When it will decrease, the market price will increase, and when the market price will increase, firms would have profits, they may have normal profits. So, then this entering and leaving will lead us to a situation, to a equilibrium point where no new firm is entering and new existing firm is leaving. This equilibrium is reached at a point when there are only normal profits. So, this is the sequence of events which take place in the long run. So, let us see this how it happens in like by graph, through graphs. This is the industry and this is the form. Here is the quantity, here is the quantity, here is the price, revenue and cost, here is the price. This is the demand, this is the demand. Initially, this was the supply denoted by S1. So, the interaction of demand and supply will give us a price OP1. So, the seller, all the sellers will be selling at a price OP1, they will be selling at OP1. And suppose seller has average cost denoted by long run average cost, because it is long run, we will say long run average cost, it is denoted by long run average cost. And this is the long run marginal cost. So, how the optimum output would be determined? So, this is the average revenue 1, this is the marginal revenue 1. The point where optimum output determined is E1, and what is the optimum output? OQ1. What is the profit? This is the profit per unit for the seller. This profit is attracting other sellers to the industry and they are entering. So, new sellers are entering the industry. So, what will happen? When new sellers are entering, the supply will shift. Now, the supply will decrease क्योंकि नए seller आ गए. Now, the supply will decrease to S2. So, the market price will decrease and it will be equals to this line. If we take this line, this is now new average revenue AR2 and it is new marginal revenue MR2. So, optimum output would be determined at point OQ2 and there are the losses. We can see that there are this is the loss. So, when there are losses, existing firms, some of the existing firm would leave the industry. So, when they leave the industry, again the supply will shift. Now, suppose supply will shift means supply will decrease and it will decrease to a point that the equilibrium is reached and this will reach to a point S naught. This is the new supply. So, now the market price will again be falling and it will fall and it will become this much that it will be tangent to long run average cost. This is new average revenue AR3, this is marginal revenue 3. So, optimum output would be equals to OQ3 and the new price will be determined at OP naught and this is the equilibrium point E, where average revenue is equals to marginal revenue and marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue. The optimum output is determined at equals to OQ3. This is the long run price and output determination. So, what we have seen? We have seen that in the long run there is no profit and no loss. At the long run, average revenue is equals to average cost. This is the conclusion, that in the long run there are only normal profits. This we can see, this we have discussed. So, this whole process can be, this whole diagram can be plotted on this curve also. So, students, it was like there are number of steps involved. So, in the last we can give a conclusion that in the perfect competition in the long run there are only normal profits. This we have discussed through a sequence of events, that the supply changes and this is how it happens. So, what are the examples? Examples are stock market, fruits and vegetables market and fish market. They resemble, they are not perfect example, but they resemble the perfect competition. So, this we have discussed. With these words I want to sign off. Thank you.